Oh, Bruce Fein joins us now live from Washington, D.C. He's an international and constitutional lawyer. Welcome to the programme. Bruce, let's start with the jury selection. How challenging will it be to get the rest of the jurors for Trump's trial? So far, 7 of the 12 jurors have now been selected, and incredible, 60 out of 96 potential jurors said that they could not be impartial.
Well, we've confronted something similar to this when I first came to Washington with the so-called Watergate trials implicating President Richard Nixon's closest associates and naming President Nixon himself as an unindicted co-conspirator. As you well know, there was literally 18 months of saturated media coverage in Washington, D.C. of the Watergate scandal, and yet a jury was selected that could be impartial. It doesn't mean that you have to be tabula rasa, just that you're willing to consider only the admissible evidence that's before the court in deciding on guilt or innocence. So it is obviously a challenge in the sense that Mr. Trump has elicited the same kind of saturation coverage with regard to his 91 felony indictments that was characteristic of the Watergate defendants and the Watergate coverage. So it just means it'll be a longer period of time to find jurors who, even if exposed to some of the information in the newspapers and the media and the social media, are convinced the judge that they can still be limiting only to what's introduced in court in deciding on guilt or innocence.
And just very briefly, why is it so difficult for jurors not to be impartial?
Because jurors are human beings. I mean, judges have that same issue as well. We all come waking up every day with a set of expectations and presumptions based upon our own experience. It's very hard to just forget things that you've read about and have exposed to forever over the last year or so. But remember, the task for the juror is simply to state and be convincing that the only evidence that will be considered in deciding whether the government has met its proof beyond a reasonable doubt is the evidence that's admitted by the judge and no others, no extraneous evidence, newspaper articles or things like that. Now, you could argue that that's a challenging test for jurors, and that's one of the reasons why in the American system, the procedures are all tilted in favor of the defendant. You need a unanimous jury verdict. A single juror can cause a hung trial. You need the proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant doesn't have to take the stand to defend himself or herself. So insofar as there may be difficulty in making certain that no jurors are prejudged against the defendant, there are other procedural rules that offset that disadvantage.
Bruce, just speak to us about Donald Trump's comments. We heard him earlier speaking, and he's called this a scam trial. Of course, we've heard this one before a lot, a political witch hunt. Could that delay the trial? And how does that impact the optics of voting when potential voters see the president there, a potential president, excuse me, there in the dock, in the courtroom?
It won't delay the trial at all. And moreover, Mr. Trump has been making this statement now, really ever since November of 2020 with the election. Everything is rigged against him. He goes to court repeatedly. He lost 61 cases and challenging election results. He's under indictment in 4 jurisdictions. He's not had a single of the cases there dismissed. He always says witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt. So I don't think it has an impact anymore because you already know what he's going to say before he says it. And you'll notice there's never any evidence that he marshals to support what he asserts. I mean, one indication, I think, of the fatuousness of his arguments is that the overwhelming number of witnesses against Mr. Trump are his own appointees, are Republicans. They're not Democrats. They're William Barr. They're Mark Meadows. They're his former attorneys. So it's pretty hard to say that it's a witch hunt when it's his own people who are providing the incriminating evidence. So this boisterousness outside of the courtroom, in my judgment, is calculated to raise money to pay his legal bills, not to affect the outcome of the case in court.
Bruce, great to get your expertise and insight on this story. Bruce Fein joining us there from Washington, D.C. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.